Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a whole assortment here of Chinese copies of the FN Model 1900. This is a type of pistol as a subject that takes up one of the four major chapters in my upcoming book, Pistols of the Warlords, Chinese Domestic Handguns 1911 to 1949, which, by the way, if you're interested in, you should definitely check out the description below where I have a link to the ongoing Kickstarter pre-sale with some cool extras for this book. But our subject today is standard-sized and a baby FN 1900s. There was also a scaled-up version of the FN 1900 made in China in 30 Mauser caliber, but we'll talk about that in a separate video. What we have here is, well, there's an assortment of different features that were built on these guns, and for the most part these were manufactured by individual artisanal or craft produced makers. These would be made basically one at a time on demand for sale to various warlords and their military forces. There were a couple factories, the Jinling factory, Jinling Arsenal, and the Shanghai Arsenal among them, that actually made a production line Western style copy of the FN 1900, but those are outside the scope of our video as well. We're looking at just the funky, weird ones here. So let's just dive in up close and take a look at the different styles that you will find in Chinese 1900s. I've sorted these pistols into three basic categories, and those are based on the grip design. So first off, this is our Jinling Arsenal 1900 copy, which is almost effectively an exact copy of an actual FN production FN 1900. So this is how the pistol ought to look if you're basing it on Belgian production. And then the three variations we have are the curved grip. Note that this has a curved swell to the back of the grip. We have the straight grip, which duplicates the pattern of the original Belgian guns. And then we have a wraparound grip. This is substantially less common than either of the other two, and it's not actually a change to the frame of the gun, but it does require a different set of grip screw attachment points, and it uses a single piece wraparound grip, kind of like a Walther PPK. Now within those three classes, we have a wide variety of other features. So in particular, the front sight, the rear sight, the side panel markings, and the safety levers will show substantial variation. There's also some variation in magazine releases, although that's less common. But if we look at safety levers, for example, our authentic version has just a simple round checkered pad, where our Chinese copies will have things like this grooved teardrop safety, this checkered teardrop shaped safety, this sort of single ridge safety, or this round pad with an added extra sort of middle pointer layer in there. And the same thing goes for front sights. Some are simple and rounded, where others can get pretty unique and creative. You'll notice on this particular one, the slide is cut back just slightly at the muzzle. The original guns, like this, the slide extends all the way flush out to the muzzle, but the Chinese like to switch it up a little bit. So some of them are slightly rebated. Some of them are actually cut away in the middle of the slide, and some of them are just kind of weird, like this one. Note that the standard pattern is to have a flat side panels on the frame, but some of these actually have rounded frame sections there. We have our wraparound grip is like that as well. Notice we also have a little bit of decoration on the front of the recoil spring guides up here. These pistols are particularly well known for having fake or spurious markings on them. These are typically Mauser and FN and Browning markings. So we'll see things like Fabrique Nationale des Armes de Guerre Herstel Belgique. That's actually reasonably close to what the proper marking is. We have a set of fake Belgian proof marks repeated a couple times, a fake Mauser banner. This one is an example that's pretty much all spelled correctly, where others are a little more chaotic, like that one. And occasionally you'll get something like this, Wauser Waffenfabrik, but still with fake Belgian proof marks, not German, and an FN logo there, and a Browning label. The vast majority of these Chinese FN 1900 copies are basically the same size as the standard original Belgian production. 4-inch barrels, give or take an 1/8 or 1/4 inch or so, because they're all handmade and they're all individually done and everything just varies a bit on them. However, there are a few that you will occasionally run into that are what I would call baby FN 1900s that have shorter grips and shorter barrels. And this is a nice nickel-plated example of that. You can see here, the grip is basically 1 round shorter, and the barrel is about 1/2 inch shorter than on a standard production gun. It still has most of the other sort of distinctive markings. The fake FN markings are a little harder to read under the nickel plating, but you can see the fake proof marks here. This one is a particularly fun example in that it has these 2 Chinese characters on the trigger, which I'm a little skeptical about this, but if one is to believe them, that means that this pistol was made in the USA. I doubt this pistol was made in the USA, but it is actually marked that in Chinese. It is very uncommon for these to have actual functional rear sights. Now this block up here is mechanically necessary. We have a cocking lever basically right there, and that's on the official real style of FN 1900. You can see this one actually has a rear sight notch. This is our Jinling Arsenal, proper professional version, and then a little cocking lever up there. But this block on the rear became a distinctive feature for Chinese production, and it would be reproduced in all sorts of stylized versions. Here's a particularly good example. You can see there's no attempt whatsoever to have a rear sight notch, although there are lots of markings up on top there. This example actually does have a rear sight notch cut. However, it's blocked by this lever. Now in a normal FN, that lever drops and is out of sight when the pistol is cocked. But not on this example. Here, that lever still blocks your rear sight notch. So, kind of what's the point? But most of them are going to be a bit more along the lines of this, where not functional as a rear sight. Overall, there are really 4 basic types of Chinese domestic production pistols that have made their way into the US. They are completely unique Chinese designs. They are Chinese copies of a variety of American and European pistols. And then there are more or less direct copies of the C96 Mauser broom handle and more or less direct copies of the FN 1900. And so that's what we have here today. And these account for a very large percentage of the Chinese pistols that made their way into the US. They are often overlooked. Not all of them are quite as unique and eye-catching as these are. Some of them are much closer to standard production FN pistols. And so I think they often kind of escape notice. People look at them and go, oh, that's just a poor condition FN 1900, without perhaps looking closely enough to recognize that it is actually Chinese domestic production. When people do notice these, of course, they're usually derided as being very poor quality because they're covered in, a weird graffiti of fake markings. And it's hard to contest that claim. I don't know that I would necessarily trust any of these to take out shooting. Mechanically, they're fine. These are chambered for the original cartridge, 32 ACP, that that John Browning designed the original FN 1900 for, but we have no way of knowing what the metallurgy is in any of these particular pistols. So I don't think I would shoot any of them myself. The factory-produced ones, that's kind of a different story. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed getting a look at this variety. This is, I would call, a sampler platter of features. As I said, there's an entire chapter in my upcoming book, Pistols of the Warlords, covering these, and among other things, we have a wide selection comparing safety levers, front sights, rear sights, side panel markings, and all the other elements that really bring extra character to these pistols. So if you're interested in finding out more, check out that Kickstarter. But either way, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.